Alright, I know what I'm up against by making this video. It's dangerous, it's a bit risky, no one likes talking about it, because this might be the single most controversial topic in the entire history of World of Tanks, and trust me, there's been a lot of competition. I'll take this moment to say this. Do not leave hateful comments or replies to anyone. I don't want to delete comments or have to hide people from my channel. I have no issue with people explaining the reason or reasons as to why they passionately like or dislike artillery or how the video could have been better, but keep it civil. Some of you won't, but try, because trust me, this is one of the single toughest videos I have ever had to make. And you'll see many reasons why throughout this entire video. I don't really ever plan on making another serious-ish video about artillery unless it gets changed again after this one comes out, which I don't really see ever happening. With all that being said, let's get one thing straight. Just right now, right off the bat. This is not fun. Neither is this. Or this.
Okay, das Matchmaking sieht nach einem Problem.
Or any of that. I think you get the idea, right? Let's get one other thing straight. I will not be making suggestions that make artillery useless, or making a case to remove it. It is part of the game. Whether any of us like it or not, it is. If you clicked on this video in the hopes of seeing artillery get bashed for 30 minutes in a documentary style video, I am sorry to disappoint you. This is the first in a long series of constructive videos I plan on making about the game this year, and probably a little bit next year, where I and some others come up with solutions to fixing these problems. It is not fair to take one of the most controversial topics in the entire game, ever, and not give it a fair try at analyzing it, and attempting to remove a lot of the problems it has, which it does. Speaking of which, a lot of the ideas people have for artillery are often emotionally charged, and it's easy to see why. Let's be honest, it is. Getting hit like 3 to 5 times a game by the same artillery piece is often very annoying. Whether it's for extra damage or stunning afterwards, it doesn't matter. There are a lot of different pieces and parts to talk about here, and people have come up with a lot of different ideas on how to improve or fix any issues it may have. Unfortunately, most or all of the ideas people have come up with throughout the years have been thought up by people who either never play artillery or play it as little as possible due to finding it boring or uninteresting or just hate the concept, which is perfectly fine. The things people tend to propose are made spitefully, at least a lot of the time, and aren't fully thought out with limited experience in actually playing artillery in the first place. And I know it isn't exactly the most adrenaline-inducing experience that requires a ton of skill to work.
What is that? What is that? What is Fuck you!
But functionally learning how it positions on all the maps can take a while, and it can prove useful. There's a lot of cliche spots, sure, but players have found many alternative positions that grant different advantages than the default positions, some more aggressive than others. Learning these positions can be useful knowledge, both for knowing about them and using them later, as well as knowing, hey, there might be something there or someone there, because I know they can do that, which goes for every other class too. Now, why am I saying all that? That's 2 paragraphs worth of information that really didn't cover anything actually related to artillery directly, so what's the point? The point is, I know these things. I've delved into both realms, both past and present. I know a lot about both sides of the shell arc, and understand what goes into it. My first tier 10 was the Object 261, largely because of the KV2, but still. I played it a lot when it was the absolutely insane 360 penetration AP round machine that was front penning the upper plates of mice. I played it a fair amount once it got changed to be just 1 shell, and that had its own set of problems. I played it for missions since it got changed to be 3 shells again, for most artillery, and know the problems surrounding that as well. I feel confident in saying I'm more qualified to talk on this subject than most people. because I've admittedly played it a lot more than others have, but also happen to understand the game a lot better than most people who main artillery. That may sound harsh, but a lot of people would have worded that in a much less delicate way. Please be civil in the comments. Long story short, I know what I'm doing in regards to this topic. At least well enough to address everything we're going to be talking about today in detail, and be confident in everything I'm going to say. We're going to talk about a lot of different things, as well as dissecting most of the fixes I've heard from the player base, as well as some of my own. This video is going to serve as a transfer from the 9.18 trio of videos over to my new project, as both video topics will be covered in this one video, and it's the last thing we have to talk about in relation to said update. This is also technically the first little piece in the gigantic Fix Watt project, which won't get its own explaining video detailing everything, but I'll be sprinkling tidbits into projects throughout the year. Here's the list of full videos I'll be doing in no particular order, because I don't actually know how long half of these are going to take, and there's some that also aren't even here. If you want to help speed up certain projects, polls to all the current projects are in the description. Feel free to fill out none or all of them. The ones that get responses the fastest will probably come out sooner, but no promises. Alright, over a page of the script down, more like a page and a half at this point, and we've covered zero ground. Much like the average SPG in a random battle. Yep, this is where we're starting, because it's the low-hanging fruit. Regardless of what version artillery you've played against, the dynamic has been the same every time. You're 750 meters away, smack. Honestly, that's about it for now. That's the way it was in 2012, that's the way it was in 2017 when they added stun to the game, that's the way it is now. There have been some differences throughout the years, most notably what one of the main subjects of today's video is going to be, which is stun, and we'll talk about what's wrong with it, how to fix it, and if it's actually the lesser of the evils over a raw damage output from, artillery. For starters, let's talk about what update 9.18 did, with some relative comparisons for the different iterations of artillery. This is a lot of numbers and patch notes, so I'll just chop it up so you're not looking at number vomit. Every artillery essentially got the same thing. Damage went down, reloads went down, and everything over a caliber of 150 millimeters got stun rounds, which we'll talk about in a minute. They also all got view range nerfs, but they already weren't anything special. The Lef has a view range all the way back from patch 8.6. This nerf was just to take normal arty from just under par to what it is now. Every arty lost about 50 to 70 meters view range, which is pretty significant considering most tier 10 arty got 350 meters view range, which can get maximum view range even before bond equipment was in the game. Prior to patch 8.6, most of them had 390 meters view range or similar, at least tier 10s, which is definitely obscenely ridiculous if we're being honest, especially considering there was no cap on how many SPGs could be on a team back then. Either way, 9.18 nerfed the view range again, which I can't say was a bad thing. Every artillery also got dispersion buffs of some variety, because yay. As for the actual numbers themselves, what you're immediately going to notice is that tier 7, 8, 9, 10 have a pretty steep drop from what was there before, in every category. But tier 6 really doesn't. I have no idea why this is the case. It makes no sense. If it was scaled to be 56% of the damage as before, which is pretty on par with all the other tiers, it should average out at like 440 to 445 damage. Not 592. The M44 went from 700 damage to 550. 78.5% of the original damage. That's pretty far off 56. If it went off the same 56-ish % damage cut, you'd be sitting pretty close to 400 damage flat. That's way, way less than 550. This, of course, would get changed again during 1.13, but we'll get there later because it was genuinely years after this, and we're not even in the same postcode as that in the timeline right now, but anyway. Simple fix to all that, just do the same thing you did to every other tier. Make the damage like 15, 20% worse. Down to what everyone else got. I see no reason to have this one tier of SPG be this big of a nightmare compared to all others. Several people who responded to the poll stated they never play low tiers, and a large part of why was because of how ridiculous lower tier SPGs are. with a big culprit being what 9.18 did. Even Myland, who told me it was a struggle for him to enjoy Tier 6 during a project we worked on last year. That project you will not get any details about because it might still happen, but who knows. We'll talk more with how to fix some stuff once we're done with the 9.18 sections of changes, but I just wanted to make it abundantly clear. These guys make low tier games so much worse, even before 9.18 came out. It isn't just because there's a lot of them, it's because there's 20% more power on these guys tier for tier than any other set of SPGs in the game, and load faster than all of them. Anyway, the reload changes seem really arbitrary here. They lack really any kind of consistency, at least in regards to overall reload speed and damage. It's really difficult to point out anything in specific because all of them got the same thing, just in varying amounts. Like, you get only HE, you get only HE, and so do you, and you, and you, and you've already had only HE. In all honesty, I kind of expected these numbers to be a lot quicker. Maybe that's just because there's multiple SPGs most of the time, but I don't know, it might be equipment too, either or. That being said, these reload speeds vary a seemingly random amount tier to tier, at least percentage-wise. There's just no correlation here to read besides everything getting faster. What none of these charts tell you, nor the patch notes, is that almost all artillery got a 50% splash radius buff. Everything got more accurate at a base level, and also got higher splash radius, in addition to stun. This is where we start the descent into madness, because the transition from occasional damage to constant annoyance is right now. When stun came into the game, wargaming were at kind of a crossroads, and they needed to do something different. Players didn't like getting hit for large amounts of damage, so they lowered the damage. Of course, this is wargaming. It wasn't that simple. They needed to come up with something that would make missions more in-depth than solely relying on damage or tracking, so they introduced stun. Now, people liked the damage being lower, but initially, players were a bit mixed about stun.
SPG. Stun, 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 stun. Enable your allies to cause 600 damage by stun. Stun, stun.
But it was being added to the game and you weren't getting one-shotted anymore. Then it slowly became apparent they never really took the annoying part of the arty away. They just kind of reinvented it. Instead of the problem being only when you got hit, now the problem lasted a good 10 to 25 seconds after you got hit as well. This now raised the question, was artillery's impact on gameplay and player-based morale actually made greater as a result of these changes, which is what they were trying to fix in the first place. For starters, the consistency of how long you get stunned is already just not, with another problem lying underneath it, which we'll get to in a second. The T92 stun duration says it can be anywhere from 14 to 35 seconds. The gun reloads in about 36 seconds. You can see the potential problem with this already, right? Well, it gets a little worse. Okay, it potentially gets a lot worse. If an SPG pens your tank and you don't die, good job, you get the full stun duration by default, no matter what. Say an Object 261 splashes you for no damage, and you use your first aid kit to get rid of the stun. Reload faster, aim a shot, whatever it may be, you need to spot someone, you get the point. You then get hit by a T92 for 1189, and are stunned for over half a minute, where your crew performs at a 25% level, if they're even still alive. It raises the question of, would you rather just be dead and move on? Like, not only are you feeling the effects of the 1,000 damage you just received, but you're gonna be almost useless until the guy reloads anyway, and most artillery who pen a tank will try and shoot it again. With certain artillery, you don't even have to pen to stun for their entire reload. This is why the FE3805 is used for artillery missions, because it can perma-stun people like that. This, of course, is not mentioning the fact that there can be, and often are, 3 artillery per team. At least 2, nearly every match, and occasionally 1 or 0. This leads to so many games where you just can't get spotted, period. If you get spotted, artillery is just yearning to fire their gun at something, anything. That's one of the reasons Cliff is a pain, or Airfield, or Malinovka, Prokhorovka, the field on Paris, all of Steppes, all of Sand River, south on Live Oaks, and Safe Haven, Ghost Town, most of Siegfried Line, Pilsen, Westfield, Redshire, Serene Coast, Airfield, again, Prokhorovka, again, Mountain Pass, Fisherman's Bay, Stujonki, Mannerheim Line, Glacier, Karelia, Mines, Muravonka, El Haluf, Overlord, Berlin, Outpost, and Prokhorovka. Again, this isn't just a case of not being artillery safe. You can't. It's a case of fighting the enemy, and both of you are getting smoked for full health for free over the course of several minutes. Neither of you can do anything to each other either, because you're stunned the entire time. By everyone, even if they miss by an entire tank length away. Instead of getting hit for a notable amount of damage, a little bit of damage, or nothing, you get hit for a debatably significant amount of health sometimes, or stunned regardless if you take damage or not. I dislike fighting for the hill on Malinovka by default, but I won't even attempt going there in games with 2 or more artillery per team. There's just no point. On a lot of flanks, on a lot of maps, the fight itself doesn't entirely change much, except for the getting hit by artillery part, which, duh. Westfield, for example, goes pretty much the same way every time. On other maps, parts of the fight become entirely unavailable due to hocus pocus arty focus. Anyone who tries to play wide on El Haluf knows exactly what I'm talking about. On a few maps, the entire map becomes a death zone as soon as you get spotted. Prior to 9.18, this wasn't as bad because already missing you did nearly no damage due to a lower blast radius. Sure, it landed right next to you, it would still do a fair amount, but it had to land right there, save for a few tanks where that was the shtick, like the T-92 and the CGZ. Now they can miss you by further away and do partially the same damage as before, and they stun you. This is where the community really butts heads on what one they'd rather have. The lesser of the evils, so to speak. Either your game sometimes gets ruined in one, big hit, or your game gets ruined throughout the entire match, which makes your tank effectively useless in nearly every situation, often breaking multiple modules in the process, and can get hit an extra third of the distance to have that happen with the stun. Neither one of those are particularly appealing, but again, it's the lesser of those evils. Since this is a question that is very person to person, let's see how you guys actually reacted. This is a poll that I ran for about a month. If you've watched the stream at all, you know that I've been running survey after survey after survey. That's because I need data. I'm one person, and you guys are like 320 people who responded to the survey. So I did not respond to this survey either, so this is not weighted data at all. My response is not in here anywhere. So we'll go through these from least surprising results to most surprising results. And a large part of why I'm doing that is to show you this one first. I think it will come to no surprise and some moderate satisfaction to some people that the vast majority of players do not like the stun mechanic. Also unsurprising was the amount of people who want the least amount of artillery in their games as possible, and yes, I really did have to add that onto this question. Though there was a generous number of people who selected 2, and I was kind of surprised. Important thing to note, by the way, is this. If the SPG cap was reduced to 1, certain medals would have to be retired, making medal missions harder in the Chimera and 279 campaigns. As a Pascucci's medal is one of the easiest medals you can try to get on purpose, removing one of the easiest medals to get would make those missions slightly harder, but still very possible. Campaign missions would also have to get changed, which I don't think many people will care about, but I have to mention it just because it will have to happen if they do that. That is, if they just don't remove it entirely. Yep, that was one of the questions. And here's what you guys said. Personally, I don't blame that many people for voting yes. But I also don't think it would be the gift from God overnight game fix people treat it like it would be. The reason I say that is because we already have a lot of games with no arty in them. And the vast majority of the time, it doesn't matter. Now, a lot of people would say, exactly, then why do we have it in the game? To which I have to say, why not? it's annoying isn't really a reason when you think about it. The number of things we would have to have removed or changed in this game because it's annoying is a heck of a lot more than just artillery. That's 47 vehicles by itself. A lot of the hate is justified, and I get it. I'm not innocent of that either. But that is just not the correct solution to this problem. Heck, it's not even really a solution to the problem. One of the longer answer responses worded it fairly well, at least in my opinion. If it keeps some people playing the game longer, that means the game can stay alive longer. And since it's a heavily biased topic, it's very easy to forget that. I'm sure there's a lot of people on the other side of the coin who have stopped playing the game due to artillery as well.
I can do it. I should have just shot him. Tried to shoot him, because I was gonna get arty regardless there. So fun, dude. Like, look at this shit. Everyone got arty. Look at this shit. Why do you think I don't play this game half the amount of time that I used to 5 years ago? You know why? You know why, Wargaming? Because there's 2 artillery lords shitting on everyone. Look at this moon crater landscape over here.
But it's one of those things where I just don't know how heavily it weighs on each side. What I will say is those of you who would love a world without artillery can take some comfort in recognizing they've never come out with a single premium reward or SPG to begin with since the Left and Sexton came out. And I don't think they ever will at this point. So I am taking that option off the table. And since there is a guaranteed 0% chance Wargaming will do it at this point, I am here to propose a set of compromises they could do. I even have sort of an idea for the campaign missions besides removing them. I agree that they are nearly all luck-based and take almost no skill, like no actual skill whatsoever. I hate it too. I've done literally every single other mission for the Object 260 with honors, except 11 SPG missions. And I can't even be asked to try almost any of them. Oh, also, here's how much artillery all the responders play. Doesn't really tell me anything in specific outside of the fact a lot of people who have responded to this survey play arty very little, and I understand why, but keep that in mind. Before we get to some of the fixes, there were a couple other questions in the survey that people had to answer. Remember when I said the community really butted heads on what iteration of artillery they'd rather have? Yeah, it's pretty close. Both versions of artillery have their less annoying qualities, and if there's any indication that there is no correct answer to this, the results of this question would be it. It's a very controversial topic where there's a lot of controversial opinions, and there's really no right or wrong answer. Everyone thinks they're in the right, because they're so passionate about how they feel about artillery, both positive or negative. Again, emotionally charged ideas, which is a good segue for the pivot I was talking about earlier. That 9.18 series is now more or less over because I don't think reusable consumables need their own video. It's not really a lot to talk about. It's just a nice change that had some little unfortunate side effects, like partially removing the carry potential of light tanks due to not being able to track tanks late game to get around them. It's one of those things that we just kind of have to shrug and go, oh well, simply because there's not a lot to be done about it. My tinfoil hat theory is that damaging modules became more common after they added reusable consumables, since you can also fix them more often. I have zero proof or documentation or anything hard evidence about any of that, but with all the other double-edged swords that were in this update, it would not surprise me if even this had something scuffed hidden behind it, let's be honest. Anyway, how do we fix artillery? Big air quotes on fix, because again, it's a very biased topic. Some people think it's mostly fine as it is now. Some people want it nerfed to complete uselessness. Some people want it reverted to the damage dealing state of 9.17.1 and before. So, it's a really mixed subject to talk about. I have ideas, and I already know certain things people say they want isn't actually what they want. They just don't realize it yet. Case in point, the first thing we need to talk about, which is artillery should be in some kind of danger, not over halfway across the map. Now, this point does pose a bit of a tough paradox, especially for me, because first of all, I agree. Same story as how the video started. Getting hit over and over and over and over again from 800 meters away just isn't fun. That guy really shouldn't be able to do that from that far away, right? Sure. But you know what would actually be more annoying and less fun? If Artie could do the same thing from just 150 meters away. Some of you know what I'm about to show you. Most of you don't. But after you see it, it might open a lot of eyes as to how ridiculous it could be. Potentially even how it might be if Wargaming actually decides to go through with it, because it's very speculatory as of right now. This is footage from the Russian server, or Ruby, or Lesta, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. They have been testing out a variety of different things, one of them being flamethrower tanks, which I never ever want to see that in the game, and neither should you. It's basically an unpennable stun throwing machine. One of the other main things they're currently testing is field artillery. Much closer range, like 250 meters tops, the longest the shell can go. Very slow shell travel time, damage being moderate at tier 10, similar to a Grill 15. Sounds decently good, right? Yeah, it's not. You are able to sit 120 meters away, unspotted, with perfect safety on every side and 1500 health on the hull of an Object 268, which doesn't have that bad of an upper plate when you think about it. So getting counter battery fired is gonna be pointless because you have way too many hit points. You fire at a steeper angle than any other SPG in the entire game, at a significantly closer range than any SPG could even dream of. Keep in mind, when I say this, I do that for fun sometimes, and I can tell you, this is horrible. The Russian server is currently super testing out a text-free branch of these tanks, and from what I've seen so far, it is far worse for the game than current Artie. What the limitation of long-range artillery is not being able to hit things behind stuff like houses, bunkers, etc., or in areas with dense amounts of rocks or buildings. You know what I mean, like Paris. You can at least reasonably or moderately predictably hide in cover in a fair number of situations. Definitely far from all the time, but you can hide. Artillery typically sits in the same spots every game, so you know where the shells are likely going to be coming from. At least, you know, the moderately normal direction. How do you hide from up? Because that's the only direction the shells come from. If it sounds like I'm describing normal artillery, keep in mind, this guy is 5 times closer to the enemy than artillery normally is. And shells are coming from the same angle as a peak arc Conch GC, which takes about 1,000 meters to reach that angle. It also takes like 5 seconds for the shell to reach the target, and some tanks can travel an entire sector before that shell even lands. The shell makes it there in about a second. Compare that to this, and all the factors in between. This is what people wanted by closer range artillery, right? Doesn't really matter how ineffective the tank might be overall, because players already don't care how ineffective artillery can be in today's game. It's the fact they're able to sit 100 meters away and penetrate almost anything in the roof in complete safety is not a good thing. And it never will be. Another thing I've seen suggested was to make them borderline direct fire like normal tanks. That simply won't work either. Why? Because I'm literally the person who drives the AMX-13 F3 like an Object 263.
Who be thinking we soft, we don't play. We gon' rock it till the wheels fall off. Hold up, wait. For my who be thinking we soft, we don't. For my who be acting too bold, take up. We gon' rock it till the wheels fall off. Hold up, hey.
And bought an M7 Priest just to ram things. People will hate artillery no matter what you do, almost out of principle. So now that we've established having to have artillery be in some kind of danger isn't actually a better idea, it's actually worse in most situations, what could we do about the getting hit 8 times from the back of the map fiasco we have had since the beginning of this game's history? It is a tough question. One that doesn't really have a correct answer, but I've got 2 ideas that might be at least interesting. Let me cook. The first idea, and my personal solution to this, is a simple act of dissuasion. in the form of a tally system or a strike system or whatever you want to call it. And no, not that kind of strike. Everyone's getting onslaught PTSD. By having the arty get exponentially less accurate the more times it fires at the same player, or in a small radius of them specifically, then you get less accurate. The first time you fire at someone, there is no penalty. The second time you shoot at them, or at least very close to them, it adds a tally, which gives a slight penalty. It'll be small, but there will be a tally indicator next to your reticle or on the screen somewhere saying, hey, your reticle is 5% less accurate now than normal, be careful with your shots. If they shoot the same person a third time, which gets another tally, they up their dispersion even further. When the artillery player shoots at a different target, they lose one of their tallies. On shots where multiple targets are damaged, no tallies are gained or lost, unless there are at least 2 targets you have yet to fire at. If you haven't fired at either of the people who got hit, your tallies reset to 0. The goal of this system is to heavily dissuade artillery players from focusing one target for multiple shots in a row. And yes, we're looking right at you, BatChat15558. Instead, they should be firing at multiple different opponents. That's one really big problem, sort of, solved. The other thing it does is reward actively using the map, crazy, I know, to aim and fire at either different places, because there's no guarantee they even do that, or at least look there. It promotes a more active role in gameplay by hoping that players think about, maybe I shouldn't hit that guy for a third time in a row and instead shoot someone else, because I'll get less accurate if I do so. A player who can balance their shooting accordingly will almost never experience an accuracy penalty, and also not ruin one single player's game for hitting them the entire match. That being said, if you have to shoot the same person more than a couple times, like at the end of a battle where you have just a light and 2 arty versus a heavy, it's not the end of the world. I don't know what the actual values would be for how inaccurate the tallies would make it, but it would get pretty steep near tally 4 or 5, which would have the maximum penalty of 5 being plus 100% dispersion, making them half as accurate in every way, including aiming time. It's enough wiggle room to allow them to correct it, but a strong enough penalty that will punish people who make no effort to do so. Overall, I think it's a great idea, and helps a lot of the issues players have with artillery. It's a low skill floor and ceiling, and there's often no thought process that goes into it, and where you can still achieve maximum effectiveness. And there's no penalty for shooting one player nonstop for 8 minutes. This puts a dent in all 3 of those. A second idea that was actually something one of my regular viewers suggested. I do not remember who, because so many people have so many different things about this topic. But the idea was to limit their range to a certain distance across the board. On paper, this works without a hitch. Just make artillery shells fly a maximum of 720 meters, just like everyone else's shells can, right? I'll be honest with this, I don't think it would work. No matter what distance we decide, I don't think it would work. For starters, a finite distance doesn't work, because the shell very clearly can go past that. It's obvious, and would be extremely weird to not be able to shoot somewhere you very easily could. Especially like if you aim up a hill, you can fire further than that 720 meters. The other reason is because of shell arc. Certain artillery faster fire rounds than others, and have a more direct trajectory as a result. If we made a hard cap to the firing range at, let's say, render distance, 564 meters, and some change, the range is too short to be able to fire over essentially anything. That might sound like good news to some of you, since it means there's less people playing artillery, right? Not quite. If those artillery aren't able to effectively fire on any of the maps, they'll just go get an SPG that can. This, in turn, obsoletes the often lower damaging artillery pieces, leaving only the ones that hit for more damage to be in the queue. Is that really what you want to have happen? And sure, you could make every single artillery have the same arc, but that might mean making all of their trajectories and speeds the same, making misses rather rare due to not having to adjust for anything. If you want to keep the shell speeds different, in order to still have that adjustment there, then we have to break a lot of the laws of physics in order to make gravity have a greater effect on a shell that is smaller than others. I understand it's an arcade game, like I get it, but that feels like a hard limit to some degree. at least to me. When a potential solution is to make gravity work the opposite way it is supposed to, I think we're going a bit too far into the deep end on what options we should be considering. I agree that getting hit by artillery from the back of the map isn't fun, but there's simply no way to fix it in a way that would still keep it fair and playable on just for everyone. It would either be completely useless or too good. Another idea I heard people talking about a lot was giving artillery a siege mode of some degree where they couldn't fire outside of it, and I think this even made it to the sandbox server at some point, but I don't remember. I just remember there was a time where there was a lot of rumors going around about it. Since shotgunning isn't realistic and the crew would never take a shot at something that close while moving, players don't want them to be able to do so. Two things with this. One, I know I just said this for the other point, but it's an arcade game where armored cars can get hit by 183mm high explosive shells and have it do nothing after they've flipped off of a cliff down to the ground and take only 24 damage from the entire thing. Guys. Two, this is the big one. All that does is ruin the fun for anyone like me who was already doing stupid aggressive stuff anyway. All it would do is make them sit at the back even more. I thought the idea to fixing this was the opposite of that. If they add a siege mode, all that will happen is even more redlining artillery, and we'll be getting nowhere. No pun intended. Now, before we get to the main event of what I want to fix, I did briefly want to talk about a potential change to the campaign missions. While it's not directly arty related, most people, including myself, get stuck with only SPG missions left to do. While all the normal tanks have missions that are skill-based with varying amounts of luck involved, artillery missions are luck-based with varying amounts of skill involved, which is often none. The vast majority of people who responded to the survey played arty only for missions, at the absolute most. For someone like me, who has every single mission they can physically do with honors except SPG missions, that can be quite frustrating. And trust me, it is. I can vouch, because it's me. Knowing all the actual difficult missions are done and having purely luck-based ones between me and one of the most coveted badges in the entire game is a tough pill to swallow. So, again, my idea to fix part of that, using orders completes the mission. That's already a thing. Using double the orders completes a mission with honors. You can go back and do the mission with honors later to get them back and the other order that you wouldn't have had before. Same as normal. But that's a big commitment. Why it works, though, is because the two missions everyone skips, period, SPG 15 for the T55 and the 260. Those are 16 orders combined. If you've done every other mission 15 with honors in the entire game besides those two, that's 18 orders. And 3 more if you bought them from that black market thing they did for some reason, but they're never doing that ever again. That lets me skip 2 mission 15s with honors and 1 normal mission with honors. Alternatively, that's like 9 normal missions for honors, like medium tank 8, medium tank 12, heavy 11, heavy 12, like some of the most annoying missions in the game, among some others. Very annoying missions that just don't have a lot to do with who is trying them, if that makes sense. This would also let players skip 279 missions, which is an even larger commitment due to less orders. This makes any mission that requires arty, Coalition 4, Alliance 8, Union 9 not a problem anymore. It sounds pretty broken, but remember, you're committing a lot of orders to do this. It is 8 orders out of 18 per mission 15 for the 260 campaign and the T55 campaign. But a lot of people would be willing to do that if it means never having to complete the SPG missions with honors. It is also moderately pointless since your only rewards are a badge, a camo you already had, and a medal on your profile. Anyone who would do this already has an Object 260 or 279 or both. Likely mostly with honors and just doesn't want to do the SPG missions. If someone is willing to commit almost half of their orders to a mission once, let alone twice, in order to never have to do it again, then I consider that a worthy sacrifice. This is something I thought of on stream a long time ago, so let me know what you think of it in the comments, where you're hopefully still being civil. Now it is time for the main event. What would I do about stun? First of all, I wouldn't really get rid of it. Wait. Don't leave. Stop typing a comment. Hear me out. I would change it in a couple ways. First of all, to save myself from having to redo a lot of the conditions for SPG missions that revolve around stun, I'm not gonna remove it. As much as I believe it shouldn't be in the game, I wouldn't do that. Instead, let's remove all the annoying aspects of it for both sides of the player base, while keeping what Wargaming actually wanted it to do. My solution is called something along the lines of, because I haven't really thought of a name for it, or a real name for it, I guess, Marked for Death. It does the exact same thing Stun does, but with a couple small changes that also end up being not very small when you think about it. For starters, no more crew debuff. That sucks. Literally everyone hates it, and I've spent a couple million credits on first aid kits just to get rid of it, both small and large. Speaking of which, remove that too. Remove the ability to use their first aid kit to remove the stun, and remove the reason they'd want to do that in the first place as well. Keep all the other mechanics the same. None of the missions have to change, even if they probably should in so many ways. And there you go. That being said, now there's a bit of an issue. What incentive is there to shoot the targets that an artillery hits now? Because there already really wasn't one before, even if they were stunned, besides the fact they may have less view range and you might not get spotted. My idea was bonus XP and credits to anyone who shoots a target that is currently marked for death. Having any actual impact on enemies that would get hit would never go well, no matter what we decided to do. Making them have weaker modules would be bad. Having a higher percentage of damage taken from shots is going to be horrible. Or something along those lines. Anything would be a terrible idea. With the change I'm proposing, there's no negative impact on the enemy vehicle who gets hit, and the enemy can't take away their mark with the first aid kit. The most annoying part of stun for both parties involved has been removed. Missions are now less annoying to complete, since people won't instantly be healing artillery's stun, which I do that too. And games will be less annoying, since your tank will be fully functional the whole time, save for when a crew member dies or a module gets broken. Put the mark on every shell, and only have a target get marked if it takes damage. Like, actually takes damage. Now you have an all or nothing direct pen shell, a very low splash shell but with higher damage, and a high splash, low damage HE shell, which is how it should be in the first place. You have a shell for damage, a shell for kills, and a shell for direct pen, in case you have to, guarantee you're going to hit something for a certain amount of damage. Alright. Now that we're done with the factual or constructive part of the video, and largely done with the video itself, I did just want to throw in some additional thoughts I had while making this video. One of the important things to note with artillery now is the changes that happened in 1.13, which was a lot later, which added a lot of stuff that's very important for countering artillery nowadays. It was also the update that changed the HE mechanics, which this is going to be an awkward video to make. But again, we got a lot of things to counter artillery, such as obvious tracers, which are dubiously correct, and sound warnings when they fire for your direction, as well as a crew skill that basically yells at you, "Hey!
What?
Look out!"
And really obvious circles on the minimap that tell anyone willing to look down there that has them enabled, which is everyone, hey, artillery just fired. I'm just imagining what might be different if we had stuff like that back in the days of tier 10s getting one-shotted by artillery, because before, you just hear or feel an explosion, and that would be your only indication if they had fired or not. That, or those people who used that mod that typed in chat when artillery was reloading and the approximate stock reload of their gun. I don't know if those were ever explicitly legal, but they were never designated as illegal either, so who knows? I guess the logic behind it was just that someone could type it in chat if they wanted to anyway, but I don't think that's a valid reason. Either way, I just feel like a lower splash radius arty with plenty of warning about a less accurate shell wouldn't actually be too horrible to deal with. A large part of why arty was deadly before 9.18 was because it was sudden. No warning or signal as if they had fired or not unless it killed someone and showed up in the kill feed. Or hearing the earth-shattering old explosion noises from a few sectors away and making a mental note. In addition, that high-damage artillery was able to be like 5 per team. Now it's 2, sometimes 3, and a lot of the things we have now would have made it a lot less of a chore to contend with back then. But we'll never know for sure. There really isn't an outro for something like this. I mean, it's a long enough video as it is. It's like 50 minutes long, and if you made it this far, kudos. But I do want to emphasize, there was a lot of deliberation for this video. This is a topic where I already know what the comment section will be. Don't write me a novel about how artillery is the worst thing in your life. Write me a novel of what you could do to improve or fix it. And don't write me a snarky one either, like I'd remove artillery because that's what I want, because that gets us nowhere. It's a very uncreative solution to a problem that people have treated as this game's miracle cure for too long, and I'm tired of hearing it. There are more pressing issues people could and should be caring about, more than the existence of artillery. I understand it's frustrating, I understand it's annoying, but it's just not going to happen. We have problems like a moderately crap matchmaking system, as well as dozens of unfound maps designed very poorly to play on the majority of the time. Tanks that haven't been relevant in years at every tier, with no buffs in sight, as well as clearly overtuned tanks we know will never get fixed. Through all of that, people still see artillery as the largest issue the game has, and think removing it will be the miracle cure this game needs to be as enjoyable as it used to be. It isn't. It wouldn't be, and it never will happen. So give it a rest. I'm not saying this to defend the existence of artillery. I'm saying it because you are simply wasting energy on something we all know will never happen. And if we spend more time trying to actually fix things, or focusing on the larger issues at hand that we know we can actually improve on, then I'd like to think we would be in a much better place. The other reason I say this is because I'll know who didn't watch the video, since they'll comment something along the lines of, they just need to delete artillery. You wouldn't do that though, right? You made it all the way to the end, so you know I'm waiting for people to post stuff like that and giggle at it, since they didn't watch the rest of the video. We'll see. Overall, I'm just so happy to be done with this video. I really don't like talking about artillery for this long. I made this video because we need to fix arty, first of all. We need to do something about it, because right now it's not the greatest, or at least not as fair as it could be. And 2 is it was the third part of the 9.18 series that people seem to enjoy, so I had to make that as well. Overall though, I'm just so happy to be done with it, because I'm very tired and burnt out of talking about artillery. I would basically start working on the video for like half an hour and then just get burned out of talking about arty, and then quit editing it, start editing it like an hour later, get burned out after 15 minutes because it's just not a topic I want to be talking about. That being said though, the next topic is going to be real interesting, and it's going to take a while, not because I'm going to be bummed out about it, but because we are going to be rebalancing every single tank in the entire game, at least tier 6 to 10. So be ready for that one.